Hi, my name's Judith and I work for Moreland City Libraries. I usually work at Glenroy Library and once a week at Faulkner, but you'll also see me down at Coburg and Brunswick too. Today we're going to do an introduction to crochet. We're going to talk a little bit about the hooks and the yarn that we use and other things that will help you on your crochet journey. First of all, we're going to talk about hooks. So as you can see, they come in a variety of colours, shapes, sizes, styles. First one is an aluminium hook, something that you probably will recognise as a crochet hook. This is the first sort that ever came out. It's got a little flat bit there for you to hold your thumb. I used to hold my hook like this, but I found that I got a lot of strain in my hand here, so I taught myself to hold it like this and ergonomically, and for my hand it's much easier and I never get any strain at all from holding my hook like that. Then we got a plastic one, very similar, just different material it's made out of. Sometimes they might have a little bit of plastic here that the yarn can snag on, so you can just file it off with a nail file. That seems to sort the problem out. Bamboo hooks, I'm not a huge fan. As you can see, the hook is quite sharp and I find that the yarn I can't get it to glide, it tends to stick on that hook bit. So I'm not particularly a fan of that one personally. Another one in a plastic, nice shaped hook, so the yarn does slide off. It's quite a hard plastic. Some people prefer a softer grip. Wooden flat hook. These are the first ones I went to when I changed the way I held my hook. Nice silver stainless steel hook, so nice rounded hook, and the yarn glides beautifully off that. So these are the cheaper versions of hooks, quite accessible in shops here in Australia. You can get them on the internet. I think most of these have probably come from eBay. Then I went on to buying these soft touch hooks by Clover, which is a well-known hook and needle brand. I love this one. The coating on the hook means the yarn glides really smoothly and it's comfortable, and it's called a soft grip, I think it is. It's not soft, it's a rigid plastic, but it is a very comfortable hook. One Christmas I decided to treat myself to a set of Clover hooks. If you go on any forums or groups and they say, oh, what hooks should I get if you want to spend some money on nice hooks, invariably people will say go for Clover. So I think a set of 8, maybe 9 was about $60, $65. I bought mine from the UK from a site called Wool Warehouse, where I buy a lot of my yarn, and that was my Christmas present to myself a couple of years ago. Now both are Clover hooks and both are really nice. A couple of weeks ago I lost both of my 4mm. I have two, and because I'd lost one, bought another one, and I lost both. They did turn up in project bags, but in the meantime I went back to my soft touch hook, and I found it was hurting my hand a little bit, but I didn't think about it until I found my 4mm Clover hook, and there's a bit of extra length in it, and I think that's why I find it more comfortable, because it just comes past the end of your hand. So these two are getting into a little bit more expensive if you want to treat yourself to some nicer hooks. Then we go on to great big jumbo hooks. I don't think I've ever actually made anything with this. I did used to sell hooks, so I think this is why I have a few of these in stock. They're great for doing your really chunky yarn, and obviously when you use chunky yarn and a huge hook, it grows very quickly. Another hook you may not have seen or been aware of, you can see that it has got the hook on the end, but it looks like a knitting needle. It's a Tunisian crochet hook. And Tunisian crochet is a cross between knitting and crochet. So you crochet all the stitches onto your hook, and then you take them off one by one like you do knitting, but you use a hook. So you only use one hook, but this is for wide things like a scarf or something like that. I have done Tunisian crochet on a normal hook where I only had 6 or 7 stitches, which fit fine on that part of the hook. Anything more than that, you'd need to go to a Tunisian hook. So that's a little overview on different crochet hooks. The other thing I forgot to mention about hooks is most crochet hooks come in full sizes and half sizes, so 4mm and 4.5mm, as do the Clover soft grip hooks. The one good thing about them is they also come in quarter sizes, so you've got 2.75, 3.25, 3.75. You'll find with some thinner yarns, fine lacy sort of weight, 4-ply, 3-ply, and crochet cotton, it may require a quarter size hook. A few brands do them, and this is one of them that does, so that's just something worth noting, that if you need a quarter size. Another thing that's invaluable when you're crocheting are stitch markers. So there's lots of things you can use as a stitch marker. You might use it to mark the beginning and the end of your rows, so you can see where the first and last stitches are, especially when you're learning. Or you might have to count your rows, so you pop a stitch marker in to count your rows or your stitches. So these ones are very basic stitch markers, which are easily accessible online. They slip into your work like so. Just loop them round, and you can put them actually directly into the stitches if you need to mark where a certain stitch is. One thing I do find about these, if you're using them with, so you're putting one like this into a loop, and then you work your way around, by the time you come back and you're not looking where, these do sometimes slip out. So I do use them, but not as much as I used to. Very chunky yarn, very thick wool, I will use those for. Similar sort of thing, a cheap plastic one, but that does close. I do find though that these, unless you can get a really good quality one, they do tend to snap quite a lot, so I don't use those, don't buy any more of those. These are probably the ones I use the most. It's just like I think it might be called a bullet head pin. It's a safety pin, just a different shape, and it's nice and easy. It's thin, so it sort of stays out of the way. You can also use a normal safety pin. These ones are ones that I made because I was just going through a phase of making them that clip in. I'm not a fan of dangly stitch markers. People tend to use these in knitting, I think, a little bit more. But they're quite lightweight, just with a few beads on them. And that's a lovely one that a friend of mine made and sent to me. Paper clip. If you don't have any stitch markers, there are lots of things you can use that you have around the house. So a paper clip is a good option. Just be careful that the end of the paper clip doesn't snag your yarn, because it can catch on your yarn. Another thing is a hair grip or bobby pin, whatever you like to call them. That's another good one. Just be careful as you pop it in that you don't snag your yarn, but you can just pop that in and keep it out of the way. Failing that, just a scrap of yarn. If you're wanting to just put it in a space like that, you could tie it in a knot so it doesn't come out, or as if you're marking in a stitch, lay the yarn across and crochet over it so it's actually within the stitch, and then when you need to, you can just remove it, put it up onto the next row, and that's a very easy piece of cotton yarn or anything that you have. So that's stitch markers, very useful tool when you're crocheting. Another essential tool for crochet is needles. You can't crochet without them because you need to sew your ends in. Unfortunately, I don't know a crocheter that enjoys sewing ends in. I tend to do them as I'm going along, because by the time I finished a project, I don't want to have lots of ends to sewing. So a basic metal needle, I think these were cross-stitch needles. Blunt end is better. Sharp end tends to catch on your yarn too much. Or you can go these cheap plastic ones, which are better for your thicker yarns. I think you can probably even get these in a $2 shop or on eBay, and these I tend to get from Spotlight or Lincraft. I have a little container that looks like a miniature cigar case, and I keep my needles in here so that when I'm travelling I've always got a needle with me and it's safe and they're out of the way. I do have a little bag that I think this came from Kmart. I just keep all my hooks in there, and I always have my needles in there, and I always keep a pair of these snips, which are great for travelling, so I always know I've got something to snip my yarn with. Any other scissors will do. These are just small ones that sit on my crochet table. quite relatively cheap. You can pick them up in lots of different places. Another little tip if you're travelling when you fly, which unfortunately I don't think any of us are going to be flying anytime soon, sadly. But when I fly, I always take a ball of yarn with me and a hook. Hooks are allowed on an aeroplane. Scissors is debatable. There's a lot of, can you take scissors on planes? I've never risked it because I don't want them to take my nice scissors away from me. But there are other options you can use. I think some airlines will let you take scissors with a certain length blade, with a very small blade, and blunt scissors like children's scissors seem to be allowed. But what I do take instead, I always have a pair of nail clippers with me because they cut the yarn really well. Or the other thing that I always have with me is dental floss, which I travel with anyway, and you can just put the dental floss around and cut the yarn like that. Not quite as smooth a cut, but it does the job and no one's going to question dental floss. So a couple of little tips for when we can fly again, and if you want to take your crochet with you. The next thing I'm going to talk about is yarn. Where do we start? My favourite go-to yarn is Stylecraft Special Double Knit, which is an acrylic yarn. You can get this in Australia. There are some suppliers in Australia. It is made in the UK and I buy it direct from there. It's actually fairly local to where I'm from. It's a beautiful soft yarn. It has now about probably nearly 80 different shades. As most balls of wool do, it has on the back exactly what it is, the meterage or yardage, washing instructions, what size hook or knitting needles you will need. Beautiful soft yarn. If we're buying in Australia, Spotlight do a Marvel. This is a 12 ply. They do it in an 8 ply. They've got quite a good colour range in the Marvel. They do a Stallion, which I find is quite a bit thinner. So I don't really use Stallion. I have used the Marvel. I find it that is a little bit stiffer. It's not got as much what I call squish factor as the Stylecraft. A tip, if you have yarn that's a little bit rough when you've finished your garment and you want to soften it, I always give my items a hand wash and put them in a laundry bag and spin them just to get most of the water out, and then I might air dry it for a while, but then I always put it in the dryer with a drying sheet which you can get from Coles. They are scented. If you don't want scented, then you probably best not using them, but that is the best tip I have for softening yarn. Someone told me about it quite a few years ago and I've used it ever since. Lincraft also do a double knit, which I have, but I haven't used very much. I would say it's similar power quality to the Spotlight Marvel. You can also get yarn from a $2 shop, which is $2.50 a ball, which I've used for many, many years. I've now moved on and used different ones. Cotton is something that I use a lot. This is probably my favourite cotton, is the Spotlight Flinders. I think it's $4.25 for a 50-gram ball now, and I very, very rarely buy it at full price. They often have 30% off store-wide, or this fairly regularly comes up on sale with, I think the last lot I got was $2.80 a ball. Lincraft also have an 8-ply yarn. I got quite a bit of this. I can't tell you how much it is now. I haven't bought any for a while. Very similar in quality, maybe slightly thicker than the Flinders, but this has more colours. There's a lot of 30 plus colours in the Flinders 8-ply cotton. The other cotton that I use is Bendigo Wool Mills cotton. Beautiful Australian made cotton. I was reading about how much yarn, cotton and wool, they do sell wool as well and wool blends, they don't sell acrylic. I was reading how much they had sold during the pandemic. Phenomenal amount, which is great. Great that it's an Australian business. Has all the details on. This size ball I think now is maybe $16 a ball, 14 or 16. I think when I bought it was 14. It might have gone up. But once a year they do have a sale on their yarn, and I bought quite a lot last year. Might have even been the year before. and I think it came down to about $10 a ball. If you spend over $50, it's free shipping. So you only need to buy 3 or 4 balls, and it sounds a lot, but then if you get the free shipping, but that's 200 grams. So if you look at paying full price, if you pay $4.25, so this 4 of these is going to cost you $17. So it's actually cheaper than the Flinders. This is easy to get because there's usually a Spotlight close to us. Spotlight do charge for postage, though. I've been buying online during the pandemic, and they charge $11.95 flat rate postage, so that's why I've been buying in bulk. So another one to consider is the Bendigo wool mills for your cotton. If you're wanting to make market bags and things like that, this cotton I've been buying from a place up in Campbellfield called Industrial Yarns. You can order online. They did make a little bit of crochet cotton. They make macrame cotton, and it kind of got around the crochet world that you could get it from this place locally, and a lot of people go. I just go up and buy it at the factory. They do quite a lot of colours. They do 2 different thicknesses. Worth checking out and it's good for market bags because it's quite robust. It does split a little bit, but when you're making a market bag, it doesn't really matter. So lots of nice colours, and then just a little bit of a heavier cotton for heavy duty things. Then you can go even thicker, and you can go up to your t-shirt yarn. I've made bowls and things out of this. You can actually make your own t-shirt yarn. All it is pieces of t-shirt cut up. So if you've been sorting out during the pandemic and you have sorted out a lot of old t-shirts that you don't want, it's cotton, has something else in it. I don't think it's not 100% cotton, so very much like your t-shirts, the t-shirts that we wear. It's quite easy to find a tutorial on YouTube to show you how to cut up a t-shirt, and you'll cut it into strips of probably maybe about 1 inch wide, and as soon as you pull them, then they turn into t-shirt yarn. And you'll need quite a thick hook, maybe 7 or 8 or 9, even up to a 10, depending on how wide your strips are and how thick your t-shirt yarn is. I know a lot of people were using these for masks when elastic ran out, around the start of stage 4 lockdown. I've actually got some masks that a friend has made, and it's got t-shirt yarn in, and they work fine. It does start to give a little bit, so I've now replaced that with normal elastic. But lots of things you can make. Great for making rugs, say to go in the bathroom or for kids' floors and things, and they grow so quickly. It doesn't take long to make, so you can quite easily make your own t-shirt yarn. Another yarn that I've come across this winter that it's just squishy as, is the Marvel Denim Effect 12 ply. I've been making scarves and hats, beanies and things with this winter. Really, really soft, lovely yarn. It's about $7 a ball, but I bought quite a few balls when it was 30% off store-wide. So keep an eye on your 2 main stores here in Australia, because they quite often do put their wool on special, and that's the time to buy. Now, we're lucky that we do have a shop in Moreland, which has opened recently, called Oz Yarns on Sydney Road. It's not much further down than Coles, before you get to Munro Street, on the opposite side to Coles. They have a big store up in Somerton, on Somerton Road, and they did have a small one in Preston Market, but they've now moved that to Sydney Road. They've got quite a lot of nice yarn. I bought these 2 from there. You can get a basic acrylic. I think these ones were maybe $2.50. I've crocheted a few beanies in this one, and it's still, even though it's a cheaper yarn, it still has the washing instructions. It has the needle size. It tells you here to use a 9mm needle or hook. 50-gram ball of shimmer. I was thinking I might make some little scarves with this. 4mm, so that's a double knit or an 8 ply, and I think that was maybe $2 or $2.50. So check it out. They do have hooks similar to the Clover ones, which I've bought and tried, and they're beautiful hooks to use as well, but they're about $2.50 each. So if you want somewhere local when we're allowed out again and you want to go and grab some yarn, check out Oz Yarns on Sydney Road in Coburg. And that's it for yarn. There's a lot more I could tell you about yarn because I've got so much more, but we don't have all day. If you have any questions about yarn or anything we've talked about, please put a comment and we'll try and get back to you. It might take a couple of days, but I will get back to you and try and answer any questions that you may have.